Hello everybody, welcome to the Chensor Dynasty. My name is James Chen and you are here on twitch.tv/jchensor. I'll be your host for the day for the standard opening of my streams, the Chen reaction, where I talk about some topics for the day, anything that just comes to my mind, and then after that will be Ask jchensor, where you can ask me any kind of questions that you want. But again, this is Thursday, and scheduled on Thursdays is First Attack, the series in which I teach people how to play fighting games and really try to explain a lot of the fundamentals of fighting games, the psychology and philosophies of fighting games for beginners and intermediates alike, to really get people to understand how you should be thinking and how you should be playing the game. Suck my nuts, Airborne Yakretskak. Thank you for the subscription. And check that message out there. So that'll be going on later today, but let's do the Chen reaction here first. Again, before I start, want to give a quick shout outs to everybody who has been supporting me the past month. February has been an amazing month for me. I set the goal to get to 250 subs down here. 250 subs by July. And I started at about 130 something. And I got to 250 before the end of February. So I've now increased the count to 300. That's the next level where I'll get a new sub emote. But like I said, if it keeps growing, I'll keep incrementing it, and as it grows, this will start to be able to help me fund a lot of extra things for content. For example, I'll hopefully be able to get an editor that'll help me edit and upload videos so I can actually sleep. I could also, pay other people to come onto the show. I can just give them like $50 or $100 for coming onto the show and spending some time on the stream, so it's worth their time making their way out here to participate on the stream for FGC history episodes and so on and so forth. So, the more subscriptions I get, the more I can bring you the content that I really, really would like to do. And, if I get an editor, they'll be able to really cull down a lot of the episodes a lot more so that they're more concise. They'll be able to give you more timestamps. I've been trying to put timestamps in my Ask jchensor segments, but that takes a good deal amount of time as well. So other ways that you can support me as well is if you want to grab some of these 86 shirts down here. You can go to tinyurl.com/86jchensor. Sorry for this long rambling beginning, but it's just the way that I want to start things. I am wearing that Eno shirt now. Very, very cool design. Lots of good Guilty Gear shirts at 86.com. Lots of good Mega Man shirts. Check them out. Here we go. So let's begin with the Chen reaction. The topic that I wanted to talk about today on the Chen reaction is comeback mechanics. Why am I talking about comeback mechanics? Well, it's because yesterday, bless Ringe's soul, Ringe was going to stream all of Dragon Ball Season 3, the first one at Wednesday Night Fights. And so Ringe streamed that. And, Sajam and Ringe did some commentary. SuperNoon jumped on for commentary at some point. And SuperNoon definitely had some pointed opinions about one of the new mechanics in Dragon Ball FighterZ, and that is the limit break mechanic. The limit break mechanic, which makes it so that if you have one last character left, if you only have one character, that character automatically just gets a free damage boost. You don't need to pop X Factor, nothing. They just get a damage boost, and they tested it, and the damage boost, although originally calculated to be 10%, it looks like this release version is 20% extra damage. And so there you go. You have this situation now where the last character doing a regular simple B&B combo into a level 1 or a level 3 can do 60% damage. And it seems like, it's definitely a very strong rubber banding mechanic and a very, very strong comeback mechanic. And a lot of people, really frown upon comeback mechanics. In fact, ever since Super Turbo, which we'll be talking about a lot later on in First Attack, When super combos were first added, people hated it. People thought super combos were awful, that they were a random comeback mechanic that, you know, you could land at any point in time and just do 60% damage just because the opponent hit a button. There are Street Fighter 4, when ultra combos were first existed, it created a huge stink that a lot of people were mad about that as a comeback mechanic. X Factor was kind of seen as a comeback mechanic. In fact, in the betas, you couldn't pop X Factor until you only had one character left. Later on, they changed it so that you could pop it at any time. But, you know, it was originally designed to be a form of a comeback mechanic. I think they probably let you pop it at any time to make it feel less like a comeback mechanic. And it was interesting because Dragon Ball kind of did the same thing. They put sparking into the game. And I think sparking was supposed to act as that kind of comeback mechanic so that when you get to the last character, you would save your sparking for then. But it turned out that it was much better to use sparking early on to save your characters from dying, to build back maybe all the health of your first couple of characters, because having assists and lockdowns was just too powerful, and using it for the solo character at the end was just not an effective way to use your sparking. Street Fighter Cross Tekken had that Pandora mode. That barely counted. That was the worst comeback mechanic in like all of fighting game history. Man, it was terrible. But the idea that these fighting games all put comeback mechanics in there, and, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people don't like them, and it's weird. So I'm wondering, you know, why devs are putting these comeback mechanics in there so much, why they're so fervent about it. And, you know, a lot of it comes down to them trying to make fighting games a little bit easier. Those who aren't aware of exactly how powerful some of these mechanics are, you know, as viewers will watch and enjoy it. So when Marvel 3 was on the big stage at a lot of events, you know, even the people who do know, when X Factor popped, everybody would be like, here we go, and like, it just kind of gave this sense of like, well, here we go, especially when it was the last character. You know, these one-versional comeback, X Factor comebacks, despite the fact that everyone knew how busted it was. It was just, you know, it was just one of those things that made everybody kind of perk up a little bit. And so it added to the viewing experience. It makes life miserable for the actual players themselves, but I get what their purpose is. I get what they're there for, right? And Toke-sanon, or Tokes-anon, depending on if it's Japanese or an American pronunciation, you know, says it's decreasing the skill gap. And that is a large part of what it is. They want to help people with less skill win. And, you know, I don't think that this is the right direction to take. Now, if the Dragon Ball limit break is what that mechanic is called, the limit break mechanic, once you get down to the last character, was only 10%, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad, but 20% does sound like a pretty significant increase. And you always want to feel like that there's creative ways to do comeback mechanics, make it a little bit you know, more skill-based. Mortal Kombat 11 is another game that, you know, when you're about to die, you get a fatal blow. The nice thing about that, then, of course, is that you can only use it once per game, so you want to think about, do you want to use it here or there? Or even something like Samurai Showdown, where you have these ridiculous comeback mechanics, which aren't real. I mean, like the Isen is a really powerful comeback mechanic. The SSM can do 80% damage by itself. But honestly, that game, you know, the game is kind of designed around that danger, so it doesn't feel as much like comeback mechanics. But, you know, there's got to be ways, I feel like, that developers can create comeback mechanics. I should say mechanics. I said the soft part loud and the loud part soft. You know, these comeback mechanics can be done in a way that they're not so blatant, because this is just basically racing rubber banding, right? And that's kind of a frustrating situation. Like, maybe it would have been more interesting if, you know, the person, if there's one character left in Dragon Ball, they have an easier time generating Dragon Balls to collect. Like, they don't have to do as much work. Anytime they hit with a combo, they get Dragon Balls, and that way maybe they can activate a Dragon Ball to give themselves back life again, or give them an extra sparking, or something like that. You know what I mean? Kind of tweak it a little bit that the opponent can find ways to try to counter it, as opposed to, hey, I have a 20% damage boost, tough luck, right? You can also build up the Dragon Balls, and then the opponent hits you first and then gets to activate Shenron, and then he steals your power, for example. I think, right, exactly, Shayon. I mean, that's why I think it's a good idea to do it that way, because it can absolutely backfire on them. And that's what, in my opinion, makes it more interesting. But the key is that the person who, you know, is down has the ability to generate the Dragon Balls a little bit more, and that way we would actually see more Shenron, and I think it would actually be cool. It'd be a hype way to do it, and the fact that someone could steal it, I think is a neat way to make that mechanic work. And you know, Toxanon says, you know, skill-based comeback mechanics are awesome. It's tough because I mean, I'll ask Toxanon this question: what is a great example of a skill-based comeback mechanic, in your opinion? You know, V-Trigger, for example, is a pseudo comeback mechanic as well. The Daigo parry. That's not really a comeback mechanic, though, because what Daigo did can be done whether he has a lot of life or no life. It's not like you only get access to parry when your life is low. That would be then more of a comeback mechanic, but you can do that regardless of how much life you have. Yeah, existing as Daigo is the comeback mechanic. You know, it has to be something that literally you benefit from, that the opponent can't benefit from, or, you know, you have an advantage to being able to utilize that a little bit more. You know, for example, like, let's say there was a comeback mechanic in Smash Brothers where if you have one stock left, you can break open Smash Balls a lot easier, right? And obviously Smash Balls are items and they're not used in actual tournaments. I'm just trying to give an example that you just gain an added benefit that the opponent doesn't get. Be fine with comeback mechanics say increase your damage by a percentage when you're low health. Yeah, I mean, that's what Rage does in Tekken 7. And I like the trade-off in Tekken 7 because then you can use your Rage for the Rage Drive or the Rage Art, and you have to kind of balance that idea out. Sometimes, do I want to spend this now or save it so that I get the extra damage? You know, those kind of things, in my opinion, are a little interesting, and that's why the blanket 20% extra damage from the limit break in Dragon Ball FighterZ is not exactly the most favorable of comeback mechanics. I don't know if there's anybody in the chat who's been playing a lot of this Dragon Ball Season 3. If you guys have an opinion on the limit break right now. But basically, you know, I'm talking about this as a discussion point. I don't really have any sort of argument one way or the other on which we should go with. But it is an interesting situation here that so many fighting games try to do that. Now, I feel like Dragon Ball did it because there were so many situations where a match would come down to 3 versus 1, you know, or 2 versus 1, and it was virtually impossible for the last character to make the comeback. The question is, do we want that person to have a better chance of making a comeback? Shouldn't they be punished for losing all your characters to that? I mean, in MVC2, it was very famous that a lot of players would, if they got their first 2 characters taken out and all they had left was Psylocke or Captain of Commando or Cyclops, they would just pause the game and start over. They'd just go straight to character select because they're just like, there's no point. There's no point at this time to even try to go for the comeback. So, you know, do people really want to see that, or are people frustrated whenever you do see the 3 versus 1 in Dragon Ball and then you basically know that the other guy has no chance? Or is that what you prefer? Because, you know, if that happens right away, let's say someone kills 2 characters right away and the 3rd character comes in and is by himself, there's kind of no excitement at that point, right? Because that person really has no chance of coming back. But is that okay? Do we want to inject that kind of false hype into the game with comeback mechanics? It's really interesting. It's really interesting. Yeah, Street Fighter 2 definitely did that. It had a damage boost mechanic depending on if you lost the first round or if your health is low, has a defense boost. There is definitely that. I mean, a lot of games have that. If your health is low, you get a defense boost. That's Guts. Guts scaling exists in a lot of games. Guilty Gear Xrd has that. Street Fighter V has that. It's a very common game mechanic for defense, but on offense, yeah, even in Street Fighter 2, the offense boost that you got was so minute that nobody even knew about it. Like, it was so insignificant that most people didn't even notice it was there. The damage is already pseudo-random in Street Fighter 2, so a lot of the times when you did see something do an exorbitant amount of damage, even if you didn't have that damage boost, it would have done a pretty exorbitant amount of damage regardless. It's an interesting way to think about it. Some same people who talk shit about comeback mechanics will lose their mind when players let go of a stick in MVC2. The super meter was a sort of comeback mechanic. Yeah, CP skills, I mentioned that. I said that was basically one of the first comeback mechanics ever created. Not really, because I think Samurai Showdown had their rage meter before that. But again, the rage meter was tied to timing. Like, you could get the rage meter built up at the start of the next round, not necessarily just when you're losing life. Yeah, KOF has a special move that can only be done when you're low in health. Those are the desperation supers. So there's a lot of games that try to do this kind of thing, that try to help buff characters who are losing, and it's a common mechanic, and it's a common thing that everybody does. So at this point in time, I don't feel like we can necessarily be mad that it gets put in. We just kind of have to accept that it's going to be there. Even something like Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, you get to activate your super Skyward Bound if you have less life, right? You have a more powerful super available to you if you get below a certain amount of health. You know, what's interesting, the stuff about Samurai Showdown is you can pop Isen, you can do Lightning Burst anytime you want, but, you know, depending on how low your health is, you get more meter in there, which does more damage for the Lightning Dash, but if the opponent turtles you and you don't use it fast enough, it doesn't do as much damage. It's a really interesting way that Samurai Showdown balanced it out, to be honest. But again, I don't think we can avoid comeback mechanics, but I think at this point in time, we just have to figure out new ways to make comeback mechanics a little bit more interesting. You know, Rise from Bronze says nothing wrong with comeback mechanics unless broken that makes all your efforts less valuable when putting opponents on lesser health. Yeah, that, or like I said, if it's just kind of a blanket thing, right? So the limit breaks in Dragon Ball FighterZ is you get 20% extra damage. Not 20% extra damage for a short amount of time, not 20% extra damage if you manage to meet these conditions, or hey, if I get up to 7 meters, I can spend, you know, only if I have 7 meters, I can spend 3 bars to, or I can spend 4 bars to get 20% extra damage for the rest of the fight. You know, something like that would be interesting, right? Because then you can imagine that if you can build up to 7 meters, spend 4 bars to get yourself up to an extra 20% damage, you may drop a combo on purpose to knock him down, slide him on the floor so you can activate that, and then you have this combo and the potential to land a level 3 afterwards, and then it's kind of a more earned comeback mechanic. It's like Johnny, right? Trying to land a coin. You hit one easy combo to go into the super mode. I mean, maybe I should just call it the Super Saiyan mode. Go into limit break, and then you can do the extra damage. You know, I just, that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I would like to see something that's just not handed to you for free and has no restrictions on it. So I'm curious to see how the limit breaks are going to affect Dragon Ball FighterZ. Are we going to see a lot more one character comebacks? Are the one character comebacks going to be less worthy? You know, I mean, people in the chat were mentioning Justin Wong's Cyclops comeback against Yipes that one year. You know, with that situation, it was super hype because everybody knew how impossible it was. Will this kind of damper a lot of the excitement of one character comebacks in Dragon Ball FighterZ? Because they did happen. It wasn't that they never happened. Sometimes, you know, a player would just have the most amazing comeback with one character. We've seen Goichi do it. We've seen Chris G do it. You know, we've seen lots of people do it before. And, you know, will that put a damper on that mechanic? Will people just look at it and be like, ugh, not exciting anymore? It's just interesting. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. a little bit of the idea on comeback mechanics. Like I said, I didn't want to talk for too long today about the Chen reaction because I've got the first attack episode coming up. So unless anybody has any questions in the chat that just wants to add to this right now, I'll be jumping on to the Ask jchensor section. Actually, it's usually what I want to do. Yeah, Textman. I mean, a lot of people aren't fan of comeback mechanics. A lot of people are not fans of it at all. So, but again, another thing that I want to advertise before I go is the Chensor Dynasty Discord. I've been thinking about this a little bit more. I probably want to promote this a little bit more. The Chensor Dynasty Discord is not just a Discord where you come here and talk about my show or anything like that. The whole entire point of the Chensor Dynasty Discord is to create a very friendly and welcoming environment for people to enjoy. I'm not on there a lot. I'm bad at Discord, but I have a lot of mods that I trust very much, and if anybody is toxic in there or if anybody is unusually cruel to other people for no reason whatsoever, I've given people all the ability to ban them. I just want to create a very welcoming environment where beginners can come in and not feel like that they're judged if they ask certain questions. You could set up matches with other Chensor Dynasty Discord members for, you know, to play online and have beginner matches with them. And, you know, again, I'm not trying to stifle people's voices or anything. There's plenty of places out there where you can talk about fighting games with that, where you could say anything you want, right? There's plenty of environments for that ability, including Twitter itself. So I just wanted to craft an environment specifically to have a place where people can go and talk about fighting games and be a beginner and be a person that's not an expert and not afraid to ask, you know, what they're scared of are stupid questions, and just basically be comfortable in a nice social environment. So there you go. I'm going to go ahead and call it for this Chen reaction. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to head back to the title screen for you guys on Twitch. Stick around. We'll do a little bit of Ask jchensor. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, you can find the Ask jchensor later on. And the first attack episode that talks all about ranges and spacing should be up on the YouTube channel already. So if you want to check that out, just do a search for First Attack on youtube.com/UltraChenTV, and you'll be able to find that episode there. So thanks guys for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys later. Peace out.